No. That's extreme. You have to stop saying that. People discredit you if you use the word fascism. People say that's not appropriate, and they'll freeze at hearing the name. Well, Darren, I want to ask you, can we define fascist for our listeners? What defines a fascist? Mm-hmm. And I think this is appropriate based on what's happening this week. First and foremost, a fascist denies the rule of law.
Yeah.
First and foremost. This means that he knows no will but his own, recognizes no limit on his power. Does that not spell Trump?
Yeah.
To achieve such power, he must defy, circumvent, or simply ignore all other established authority, whether it's the Congress, whether it's an individual, whether it's the media, to defy and deny and smear any other authority but his own. And in the process, destroy the institutions through which it is exercised. In America, these are the three branches of government. The fourth is the estate of the press. Congress was created to make laws for the nation at large. The judiciary with its proper bounds, the executive, which Trump heads, enforces the press. More broadly now, the media keeps tabs on how well the process works. I was at a media rally. I was at a rally for Trump. He categorically pointed his finger at the press and encouraged a physical attack against the press. Not symbolically, literally. And you know what happened, Darren. You saw the people. Trump has took a sledgehammer to these democratic institutions. Mm-hmm. He has no interest in legislating. He mocks Congress as a body. He personally attacks its members. He will demand that it act to solve the messes he makes while refusing to indicate what he wants or is willing to approve, and gives both houses the bird when they offer him any solutions tailored to please him, like Pelosi ran into when she came in. If I'm not mistaken, what was she asking for? Was it infrastructure?
Yeah.
That's a reasonable request for America. And he, figuratively, if not literally, gave her the bird. Said, I'm not going to work with you until you alleviate the investigative process. He has stuck his middle finger up at the Congress, at the Senate, at any institution other than Donald Trump's institutions.
I've got this. This is from the Associated Press out of Washington. She's calling for an intervention to save the nation from him. He says she's crazy. The enmity between Donald Trump and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi deteriorated Thursday into rude and then some questioning of his fitness for office and her sanity, with personal attacks flowing from both the nation's top elected officials after a dramatic blow-up at the White House. However intended, the exchanges left uncertain ahead of the 2020 election whether Trump and the Democrats will be able to work together on serious must-pass tasks such as funding the government and raising the federal borrowing limit, let alone thornier issues such as immigration, national security, and more. Pelosi went first with demure shrugs and practiced sassed. Then, as a tornado warning blared across Washington, Trump followed with a derisive nickname, something he has declined to give her up to now. He told reporters at an afternoon press conference, quote, "She's a mess," end of quote. This was the day after he walked out after 3 minutes at a meeting between Pelosi, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, and Trump. Quote, "Crazy Nancy. I watched Nancy and she was all crazy yesterday," end of quote. Then he gave his little, "I'm an extremely stable genius." Yeah.
Well, Trump ignores his attacks.
Here, she tweeted this in response. Quote, "When the extremely stable genius starts acting more presidential, I'll be happy to work with him on infrastructure, trade, and other issues." End of quote.
Yeah, she's praying for Trump, though.
But she won't put impeachment on the table.
Listen, here's my feeling on impeachment. You might think it's a gamble. Jeff Daniels came out this week and said, we don't get him out, we lose democracy in 2020.
Yeah.
And it's a gamble to wait to 2020 to get him out. And I agree with Jeff Daniels.
Yeah.
And you know what? They have the same argument against Bernie. Bernie's not going to get it, so why worry about Bernie? The DNC will make sure he doesn't get it. Bernie has enriched progressive dialogue. Because of Bernie, we even understand the idea of Medicare for all. Because of Bernie coming out with real progressivism in 2016, he's educated. He's educated millions of Americans that didn't know how to spell progressive. And so whether or not he gets elected president, would be a great reward, he still enriches the entire mind of America that's asleep to progressivism. Don't think the stable of putrid, rank establishment dung throwers that we see the other 19 members, who they are, is going to do anything for progressivism. You need the voice of somebody attacking Trump in an impeachment process if you think you're going to win in 2020.
Yeah.
Get a team of people to attack Trump in the impeachment process, and it will only help the election of 2020. Whether you win, if you win, you win. If you fail, you've been hammering at him for months. Just like Bernie has been hammering at the pillars of Wall Street for years. Unilaterally. There's
decades.
No other voice doing it. You're not going to get any other venal Democrat to come close to doing it. That's the value of Bernie, not whether or not he's going to be elected.
I will say there is one other voice that is hammering at Wall Street, and she's a brand new one, and her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, she's not in the stable of presidential candidates. I want to finish real quickly here with the fascist denial of law. Trump ignores or attacks laws he doesn't like. And he has maintained a running attack on the Justice Department, the State Department, the Education Department. Wants to cut $7.5 billion, these are my words, in the Education Department, the Labor Departments, the regulatory departments, the scientific agencies, nor when interests allied to him that challenge him, he will attack them. He is simply uninterested in the functions of government as such, and all he sees government for is to be an instrument to support his will or his private business empire. Folks, if you don't wake the hell up, you're going to fulfill the warning by Naomi Wolf and other political experts that say it's the end of America. It's not a slump. It's not a downtime. We'll recover in 2020. We are teetering on the brink of total end of democracy. And I repeat what I said 20 minutes ago. If it goes, it doesn't come back.
Yep.
And some European countries not going to invade us like we did in Normandy to stop fascism here in the 50 states.
Exactly.
There's nobody there. It's over. And all the dictators in Trump's little club of despots, they'll be your rulers.
Yep. Where are you reading that from?
An excellent article from the Triangle called "It Has Happened Here: Fascism in the United States." Based on
who's the author of that piece?
Robert Zaller, Zaller. And Darren, you remember the great Sinclair Lewis book, "It Can't Happen Here"? Mm-hmm. That was in the 30s, 1935, I believe he wrote that. And he was warning that it sure as hell can happen here, because that's a natural propensity of mankind, is to rule with power and force for their own personal gain.
Yeah.
And now it has happened.
And I want to read this. Justin Amash doubled down on everything yesterday, on Thursday. I want to read this on his Twitter. This is very lengthy, so be patient with me. Mueller's report describes a consistent effort by the president to use his office to obstruct or otherwise corruptly impede the Russian election interference investigation because it put his interests at risk. The president has an obligation not to violate the public trust, including using official powers for corrupt purposes. For instance, presidents have the authority to nominate judges, but a president couldn't select someone to nominate because they promised the president money. This principle extends to all the president's powers, including the authority over federal investigations, federal officials, and pardons. President Trump had an incentive to undermine the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election, which included investigating contacts between Russia and the Trump campaign. The investigation threatened to uncover information, including criminal activity, that could put Trump's interests at risk. Ultimately, the investigation did uncover very unflattering information about the president, his family, his associates, his campaign, and his business. It also revealed criminal activity, some of which were committed by people in Trump's orbit and, in the case of Michael Cohen's campaign finance violation, on Trump's behalf. The investigation began before the president was elected and inaugurated. After Trump assumed the powers of the presidency, Mueller's report shows that he used those powers to try to obstruct and impede the investigation.
Here you go.
Some excuse Trump's conduct based on allegations of issues with the investigation, but no one disputes the appropriateness of investigating election interference, which included investigating contacts between the Trump campaign and people connected to the Russian government. Some examples in Mueller's report of the president's obstructing and impeding the investigation include: 1. Trump asked the FBI director to stop investigating Michael Flynn, who had already been his campaign advisor and national security advisor, and who had already committed a crime by lying to the FBI. 2. After Attorney General Sessions recused himself from the Russian investigation on the advice of Department of Justice ethics lawyers, Trump directly asked Sessions to reverse his recusal so that he could retain control over the investigation and help the president. 3. Trump directed the White House counsel Don McGahn to have special counsel Mueller removed on the basis of pretextual conflicts of interest that Trump's advisors had already told him were ridiculous and could not justify removing the special counsel. 4. When that event was publicly reported, Trump asked that McGahn make a public statement and create a false internal record stating that Trump had not asked him to fire the special counsel and suggested that McGahn would be fired if he did not comply. 5. Trump asked Corey Lewandowski, his former campaign manager, to tell Attorney General Sessions to limit the special counsel's investigation only to future election interference. Trump said Lewandowski should tell Sessions he was fired if he would not meet with him. 6. Trump used his pardon power to influence his associates, including Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen, not to fully cooperate with the investigation. Trump, through his own statements, such as complaining about people who flip and talk to investigators, and through communications between his personal counsel and Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen, gave the impression that they would be pardoned if they did not fully cooperate with investigators. Manafort ultimately breached an agreement to cooperate with investigators, and Cohen offered false testimony to Congress, including denying that the Trump Tower Moscow project had extended to June 2016 and that he and Trump had discussed traveling to Russia during the campaign. Both men have been convicted for offering false information, and Manafort's lack of cooperation left open some significant questions, such as why exactly he provided an associate in Ukraine with campaign polling data, which he expected to be shared with a Russian oligarch. Some of the president's actions were inherently corrupt. Other actions were corrupt and therefore impeachable because the president took them to serve his own interests. The president has authority to fire federal officials, direct his subordinates, and grant pardons, but he cannot do so for corrupt purposes. Otherwise, he would always be allowed to shut down any investigation into himself or his associates, which would put him above the law.
Nancy Pelosi, impeachable is not the same word as impeccable, okay? Impeachable is not impeccable unless you want to say impeccable corruption. Then you can use that as a synonym. Darren, we're part of the media. Mm-hmm. We don't get checks from General Motors to support their objective and their perspective. We sell a mug. For how much are our mugs, Darren?
$15.
The one institution that Trump will continue to relentlessly attack is the press. Our little show, you will hear more truth here. We referred to books this morning. We talked about the book called It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. There's other ones. The goal of fascism, however, is to replace news with propaganda, a reflecting mirror that eliminates all competing views of reality. The fuel propaganda runs on is the lie, and the lie replaces the real when it can freely contradict itself. The content of the lie is unimportant, for what validates it is merely the source. A very substantial percentage of the American public now believes whatever Donald Trump says because he is the one who says it. I repeat, if you want to see wallpaper of fascism around you, America, there is a large percentage of Americans today in the public that now believe whatever Donald Trump says because he is the one who says it. That isn't fascism coming. That's fascism here. Mm-hmm. You better be awakened and stir and fight for the democracy that is dying as we stand here. Darren,
Is that the same triangle piece?
That's the same triangle piece. I've never been moved as the current week, just listening to what's happening and seeing. Again, I'm going to say this one last time. Folks, I mean this sincerely. The fascist denies the law. And that's what this week was.